The security system didn't detect anyone entering the house, but at exactly 2:13 a.m., something appeared in the hallway, and no one could explain how it got there. Tonight, we're going through 3 true stories, where security footage captured something that shouldn't have been there. Where are you watching from tonight? Let me know in the comments. Now, turn down the lights. And let's begin. The house was completely quiet that night. Nothing out of place, nothing unusual. The family had gone to bed earlier than normal, and by midnight, every light in the house had been turned off. The security system was armed, just like it was every night. Doors locked, motion sensors active, cameras running in every hallway. It was the kind of routine they never really thought about, because nothing had ever happened before, and there had never been a reason to think that anything would. The notification didn't come until the next morning. It was just a standard alert from the system. Motion detected, 2:13 a.m. At first, it didn't seem important. These things happened sometimes. A sensor glitch, a shadow, something small that triggered the system by mistake. But when they saw the timestamp again, they stopped, because no one in the house had gotten up at that time. Not to get water, not to use the bathroom, nothing. They opened the app expecting to confirm that it was nothing, just a quick check, something they could dismiss in a few seconds and move on from. But as soon as the footage started playing, that changed. No one said anything. They just watched. The camera showed the hallway exactly as it should have been. Still, empty. For several seconds, nothing happened at all. And then, something entered the frame. Not from a doorway, not from anywhere that made sense. The figure didn't walk into the hallway. It didn't come from a room or from behind a door. It appeared from the darkness at the far end, where the camera barely reached. At first, it was difficult to make out, just a shape, something darker than the rest of the hallway, but it didn't move. It just stood there, centered in the frame, as if it had always been there, and the camera had only just noticed it. What stood out immediately was how still it was, completely still. No shifting, no movement, not even the kind of subtle motion you would expect from a person standing in place. It didn't trigger the motion sensors either. The system had only recorded the moment it appeared, not before, not after, and that didn't make sense, because if something had entered the hallway, it should have triggered everything, but it didn't. It was already there, before the system even reacted. They replayed the footage again, and then again, trying to figure out what they were actually looking at, but the more they watched it, the less it made sense. The shape didn't look right, not clearly human, but not something they could identify either. It didn't lean or shift its weight. It didn't react to anything. It just faced the camera, as if it was aware that it was being recorded, and was waiting. After several seconds, it finally moved, but not in a normal way. There was no natural step, no shift in balance. It just advanced, slightly closer to the camera. One small movement forward, and then it stopped again, completely still. That was enough to confirm it. Whatever they were looking at, it wasn't just a shadow, and it wasn't a glitch. It was something physically there. Inside the house, that's when the camera glitched. Just for a moment. The image distorted, like interference passing through the feed. A quick flash of static, and then it returned. But when it did, the figure was closer again. Closer than it should have been. There was no visible movement between those frames. No transition, just a sudden change in position, as if something had been removed, or skipped entirely. Now it was close enough to see its outline clearly. The shape of a body, a head, shoulders, but the details didn't match anything familiar. There were no clear features, no face, no eyes, just a dark form that absorbed the light around it, and it didn't move again. It just stayed there, closer than before, as if it had reached a point and decided not to come any further. The footage ended seconds later, just cut off. No final movement, no explanation, nothing showing it leaving the frame. That alone was enough to make it unsettling. But what came after was worse, because when they checked the system logs, They saw that the camera had not stopped recording, not at that moment, not even close. It had continued running for another 17 minutes. There should have been more footage, 17 full minutes of it, but there wasn't. The file didn't exist, no backup, no saved clip, nothing stored in the system at all. It was as if that entire section had been removed, completely erased, and no one could explain how that was possible, because the system didn't just delete footage on its own. It never had before, and it never did again. The only thing they were left with was that short clip, just a few seconds of something standing in their hallway, inside their house, without ever entering, and without ever leaving. They checked every door, every window. Nothing was disturbed, no sign of entry at all. But after that night, they stopped using that hallway camera completely, because whatever it had recorded had been inside with them. And the next case is even harder to explain. The next case is harder to explain because this time, someone was actually there when it happened. And the footage didn't just capture something, it showed it getting closer. The building was almost completely empty at night. Just a few offices, a storage area, and a long hallway that connected everything together. After 10 p.m., only one person stayed behind. The night shift security guard. His job was simple: monitor the cameras, walk the building once every hour, make sure everything stayed locked down. It was quiet work, repetitive, predictable, and most nights, nothing ever happened. At least nothing that made him think twice about being there alone. That night started the same as every other shift. The cameras were running, all feeds were clear, no motion alerts, no alarms. Everything looked exactly as it should. He sat at the desk, watching the monitors, occasionally glancing between screens, just passing time, until one of the feeds changed. Not dramatically, not enough to trigger an alert, but enough that he noticed it immediately, because something in the hallway didn't look right anymore. He focused on that camera feed, the hallway outside the storage area. At first, it looked empty, just like it always did. But after a few seconds, he realized what was different. There was something in the frame that hadn't been there before. Something near the far wall, not moving, not clear enough to identify. Just there. He leaned closer to the screen, trying to make sense of it, because he didn't remember seeing anything there earlier. At first, he assumed it was a trick of the lighting. Shadows could shift in that building depending on which lights were left on, but something about it didn't sit right. The shape didn't match anything in the hallway. No furniture, no equipment, nothing that should have been there. And it wasn't blending into the background either. It stood out, subtle but noticeable, like it had been placed there after the camera had already started recording. He kept watching it, waiting for it to move, waiting for something to confirm what he was looking at. But it didn't move at all. It just stayed there, still. And the longer he looked at it, the more certain he became. That shape wasn't supposed to be there, and it hadn't been there before, which meant one thing: something had entered the hallway, without triggering any of the cameras. He decided to check it in person. Standard procedure. If something looked off, you verified it physically. He grabbed his flashlight and stepped out of the office. The hallway outside was completely silent. No movement, no sound, just the low hum of the building. He walked toward the storage corridor slowly, keeping his light fixed ahead. And when he reached the spot, there was nothing there. No object, no shadow, nothing that matched what he had just seen on the screen. He stood there for a moment, confused, then turned back toward the office. When he got to the monitors, the shape was still there, exactly where it had been before, in the same position, on the same camera. But now he knew something wasn't right, because he had just been standing in that exact spot, and there had been nothing there, nothing at all. He replayed the footage, watching carefully this time, frame by frame, trying to catch the moment it appeared. But there wasn't one. No entry, no transition, no point where it came into view. It was simply there, from the start of the recording. And then something else changed. The shape shifted slightly, Not enough to trigger motion detection, but enough that he could see it, adjusting its position. That's when he realized something else. It wasn't facing down the hallway anymore. It was angled differently now, slightly turned, toward the camera. And that didn't make sense either, because if it was just a shadow, it shouldn't change direction on its own, but it had, and now it looked like it was facing him. He stepped back from the monitor, trying to process what he was seeing, and then the feed glitched, just briefly, a flicker across the screen, and when it came back, the shape was closer than it had been before, and this time, there was no question, it had moved. He didn't go back into the hallway again. He stayed in the office, watching the screen, waiting for it to move again, but it didn't. It just stayed there, closer than before, facing the camera, and then the camera feed cut out completely. No signal, no image, just a blank screen. The rest of the system stayed online. Every other camera was still working, except that one. By the time the feed came back, the hallway was empty again. Nothing there, no sign of anything at all. But the system log showed something strange. That camera had gone offline for exactly 47 seconds, and during that time, there was no recorded footage, no saved data, nothing, just a gap. And whatever had been there had moved closer before the feed was lost, which raises a question. Where was it during those 47 seconds? The final case didn't happen inside a building. It was recorded outside, and this time there were no walls, no doors, nothing keeping whatever this was at a distance. It was late when he got home that night, just after 1 a.m. The parking lot was mostly empty, with only a few cars scattered under dim overhead lights. He parked in his usual spot, grabbed his things, and locked the car behind him. Nothing felt unusual. No sounds, no movement. Just the quiet stillness that comes with being outside that late. He walked toward his building without looking back, and by the time he was inside, he had already forgotten about the parking lot completely. It wasn't until the next day that he noticed anything was wrong. His phone had sent a notification overnight, a motion alert. Triggered by his car's built-in security camera, the timestamp read 2:17 a.m. At first, he assumed it was nothing, maybe someone walking past, headlights from another car, something small, but when he opened the footage, he immediately realized it wasn't any of those things. The camera angle showed the front of his car, parked exactly where he had left it. The lot was still empty, no cars passing, no people walking by. Everything looked completely normal. For several seconds, nothing happened. And then, something appeared at the edge of the frame, near the back of the vehicle, just barely visible at first, like it had stepped into view from somewhere the camera couldn't see. It didn't move across the screen like someone walking by. It stopped, standing just behind the car, partially hidden. The shape was difficult to make out clearly, but it was tall, and it wasn't facing the camera. It was facing the car, as if it was looking directly at it, or at something inside it. And for a moment, it didn't do anything at all. It just stood there, completely still. He replayed that part several times, trying to understand what he was seeing. But the longer he watched it, the more unsettling it became, because it didn't behave like a person. There was no shifting, no natural movement, no sign that it was adjusting its position at all. It was just fixed, in place. And then, after several seconds, it moved, but it didn't step forward. It didn't walk around the car. It moved closer, without crossing the ground between. One frame, it was behind the vehicle. The next, it was beside it. No transition, no visible movement, just a sudden change in position, as if part of the footage had been skipped or removed. And now it was close enough to be fully visible in the camera's view. Now it was facing the camera, standing just a few feet from the front of the car. The shape was clearer now, but not in a way that made it easier to understand. There were no clear features, no visible face, just a dark outline that seemed to absorb the light around it, and it didn't move again. It just stood there, looking directly into the lens. That's when the camera audio picked something up. A faint sound, low, almost like breathing. At first it was hard to hear, but when he increased the volume, it became clearer, slow, consistent, coming from somewhere close to the car, and it didn't match anything in the environment. No wind, no passing cars, nothing that should have been there at all. Then the figure moved again. This time there was no glitch, no skipped frames. It leaned forward, slowly, toward the front of the car, toward the camera, and for a moment, it looked like it was trying to look inside, through the windshield, as if it expected someone to be sitting there. And then, the recording cut out. No warning, no transition, just a sudden stop. The clip ended right as the figure reached the front of the car, but just like the other cases, that wasn't the full recording, because when he checked the system logs, he saw that the camera had continued recording for another 12 minutes. There should have been more footage, 12 full minutes of it, but there was nothing saved, no additional file, no backup clip, no trace of what happened after that moment. And that didn't make sense, because the system automatically stored everything it always had, except for that night. That one recording was incomplete. He checked the car later that day, looking for anything out of place, any sign that something had been near it. But there was nothing. No marks, no damage, no indication that anyone had been there at all. But after that night, he stopped parking in that lot completely, because whatever had been standing outside his car had been close enough to look directly inside, and the camera only captured a few seconds of it, which means most of what happened was never recorded. 3 separate recordings, 3 different locations, and in every case, something appeared without ever being seen entering. If you've ever experienced anything like this, let me know in the comments. And if you're watching late tonight, you might want to check your cameras.